Hey, welcome everybody to today's special committee to review IT contracts on November 14th, 2023, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Beckham.
Here.
Zimmerman.
Present. Here. Here.
Walker.
Okay, first up, we have Commissioner Soikata, Department of General Services. We have Carol Pierce from the County Attorney's Office.
That's why God asked me to sit.
Absolutely, no, more than welcome.
Thank you.
If you think I do anything wrong, feel free to jump in, and you and Betsy can argue about it. All right, so I think the first thing is if you want to say something about the process or whatever you want to do ahead of time,
Absolutely.
and then we'll go into questions from there, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. A little bit of background about me. My name is Samantha Swikata. I'm the Commissioner of General Services. I've been with the county for almost 17 years now. I've been in procurement for 13 years, and the departments combined in 2015, so with IT for the past 8 years. And I wanted to give you a little overview about procurement and what the purchasing department does. We are responsible, Orange County is a centralized procurement county. The Department of General Services purchasing oversees hundreds of bids and proposals that go out in a year, process all the purchase orders for commodities and requisitions, millions and millions of dollars of county spend in a year. We are governed by basically two major laws from New York State on our procurement process. That's GML 103, and that governs the competitive bidding process. And the competitive bidding process is governed by those laws. It's for commodities and non-professional public works, generally services in the aggregates countywide, 20,000 for commodities, 35,000 for public works services. That gives you the legal requirements that we have to put those bids in the papers of official record. They have to be out for a minimum amount of time. All the bids that have come in are sealed and unopened until the due date. The openings are public, and then they are reviewed, scored, and awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidders. And responsive means they followed all the rules of the bid, and responsible means not only do they follow all the rules, but they are able to actually perform those services that we asked of them. Those competitive bids are not what we're discussing today. That is under New York State's General Municipal Law 104, which says everything that is not under the 103 competitive bid category, you have to have a policy as the county, and you have to follow that policy in order to do so. And that 104 is our Orange County procurement policy that's amended, ratified, and voted on by you as legislators when it comes up. And that is the ability to have professional services, piggybacking, quotes. That's your everything that's not covered under the competitive bid process, and that's what applies here today. So for GML 104, the procurement policy, the range that we're looking for right now is quotes, and then the quotes can be either written quotes, which basically means it can't be verbal. You can't write in your file that I spoke to John Smith on December 2nd. He told me it was going to cost $55,000. It actually has to be in writing. That's what that means. We have the ability to do piggybacking, which is any state or federal or other government contract is available for us to use. It's already been solicited by them. They've received their vendors' proposals. They have vetted them. They have gone through all the security and compliance methods. They have awarded them contracts. And in the case of the federal and state governments, they post those up online where we are able to get them as municipalities, no questions asked. We have to register to do that. It's not available for anybody to go get these contracts that are let by New York State OGS and the federal GSA. You have to register to be granted permission to access them. But once you're in, you have the availability to use any of those federal or state procurement methods basically without questions. And in this case, of the federal, you can actually go online and order it, just like you're ordering from Amazon. You can order goods, services, items, equipment. New York State has just eliminated their ability to do that online ordering. The federals absolutely have that. So when we're talking about quotes from GSA, it's not a quote, it's actually an entire solicitation process behind that quote. That's what's applying today. Also in the professional services are a number of exemptions where you are allowed to continue those, a continuity exemption for projects that have been ongoing, they've hit a snag, and it makes more sense to continue from a time and effort and cost standpoint than to stop whatever you're doing, write a solicitation, issue the solicitation, receive the vendor's proposals, review them, contract, start all over months later with, hey, we know we have a problem now, please figure it out and tell us how to proceed. Well, we can eliminate all that time and expense by doing that continuity under the procurement policy.
Okay. So one of the things that we're tasked with doing is going through the whole contract process and being very open and transparent. As you know, there were some accusations made on the steps of the county government center. So we need to review it and say, you know, did we follow the policy? Did we not? That's why we're starting with you, because you're our contract expert. I think Mr. Fagione, you said you prepared some questions to start with.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have one question in regards to the circumstances of here today. The contracts in question, any part of those contracts in violation of the county's procurement policy?
No.
That's the question I had, Chairman. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate your time. So this you're saying it falls under our procurement policy.
Correct,
Is that by choice or by law?
by law.
It is by
Professional
law. Okay.
services are part of the, are not part of competitive bidding by 103. They're underneath 104, which dictates that we have our policies and we follow those.
Okay, so it falls under 104. So there was no need to do a competitive bid. in this
Correct,
case.
it's not a competitive bid.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just clarify,
Yes.
104 sets forth that the county must have a policy. So we do have the procurement policy, and the procurement policy, which the legislature has ratified and amended from time to time, was followed. So when we say it's pursuant to law, the law says that we should have a policy. The policy was followed.
Okay, thank you.
You good, Rob?
Yes, thank you.
What is there, Luma?
Thank you, Commissioner. So, as you can see, this last couple of weeks, there've been a lot of questions about and concerns that have been raised, and rightfully so, right? We're all here to want to make sure to take the bottom of things, and we appreciate you making the time to answer some questions. My big question is, how
Excuse
was
me.
this,
Thank you.
how was this particular company identified to begin with?
Let me start off from the environment that we're looking at to consider this contract. As we all know, Suffolk County was breached literally months before this. It was breached and they were shut down to pen and paper. I mean, I can't imagine what that would be like to walk in and not have anything available technology-wise. I mean, most of us panic when we leave our house without our cell phone. Can imagine walking into the county and having to take care of our residents and constituents with absolutely no technology. 911 isn't running. The county clerk can't process mortgages and titles, and the jail and Valley View don't have their medical records, and the health department. I mean, it was an absolute watershed moment, I think, for the counties as a whole in New York, and for IT to go, hey, IT is no longer just, I forgot my logon, or, how do I total my Excel sheets? Like, IT is literally now on the front lines of war. This was a huge, huge moment, I think, for all of us. And we were looking, I know when we presented the split for IT, one of the first questions we were asked at this table was, what's the plan? So when I took over as commissioner, I did the same exact thing. knowing what we're under, I had pulled together the directors and the leads, and I said, what's the plan? Who's driving this bus? Where is it going? And I heard a lot of, well, we know we have to do this, and we have this, and we have these problems, and we have these issues, and we're short on staff, and, you know, our equipment is old, we're the government, we don't have the top-notch stuff, and we have vendors that are, you know, outsourced and contracts, and I said, okay, but that's knowing you have to do something and having a plan are two entirely different things. So that's how we started looking for advisors, because cybersecurity is not just, you don't just buy cybersecurity, you know, it's not some shiny Lamborghini that you can just purchase and you have cybersecurity. My analogy is you can't take that Lamborghini and park it in an old barn and run it down the dirt road and have your backyard mechanic. You know, you have to have all the components together. You have to have your equipment, you have to have your staff, you have to have your programs updated, you have to have your whole network, your roads, your infrastructure, all of that has to be accounted for. And when you know you're already behind the 8 ball, how do you plan what's important? You know, without that oversight, without that vision, where do you go when you know you have so much to do? So that's how we started with that, you know, looking for advisors.
So how did we get to Star CIO?
I was given Star CIO by Alicia. Alicia was the deputy since 2019. She oversaw IT for the most part, and I oversaw procurement. She was heavily involved in IT and all the processes and knew all their shortcomings. She's very technology driven and very passionate about that. And she was the one that had sourced multiple of the codes that we used.
So there was 3 quotes that were made, correct?
There was multiple quotes.
Okay, so, but this was the one that was most detailed, my understanding, correct?
That statement of work came from the contract. There was actually an initial proposal or quote or something before that actual statement of work. That was what you guys saw as in response to the letter.
I'm not sure I understood. Could you?
There was something before that statement of work that you saw in the official response.
Okay,
There was a quote before that.
so there was a quote before January, before July, when was when were the initial quotes made for these?
December, I want to say.
Do we know how many quotes we had at that time?
Well, we started with Gatner. Had started in November. Star CIO in December, and then I'd have to look and refresh my memory on when anything else was.
When we looked at the different quotes, comparatively, what were the big differences between Star CIO and the other quotes that made them stick out as more efficient for our purposes?
Star CIO was actually willing to come on site. That's very rare in technology contracts. Most of our contracted multi-million dollar vendors tend to be remote right now, as there's a lot of IT. He was actually willing to come in, and he had an overview. You know, he would come in and give us a whole 2-month evaluation of, he would interview the vendors, interview the staff, look at our processes, look at our procedures. Whereas I didn't see that breadth of services in most of the other quotes. A lot of the other quotes, like I said, they're remote, they don't want to come on site, you're asking them questions, they're getting back to you with answers. They're not really giving what he gave as far as his availability and his services.
One of the things that we always try to do, obviously, is to be fiscally conservative. We look at, the different numbers comparatively. How did the price tag compare to their price to the others?
I've looked at numerous industry sources and available resources, and the CIO positions that are available for those kind of things ranged from anywhere from $320,000 to $465,000 a year. And like I said, not all of them offered that 2-month recording period that you could just get them for a short amount of time. So the $65,000 to me was what we needed in the time frame we needed, in the quick ability to get that kind of background in a short amount of time for that price.
So we're brought to a really important part of it, the 65,000. So What we see, however, is that we went from $65,000, which is my understanding, 8 weeks of work, correct?
Correct.
Approximately how much do we have like a breakdown of what that work would look like?
Oh, absolutely. I have,
And so we can account for all the work that they did.
absolutely.
So we're talking 65,000, that in balloons to significantly more. And even more than the 300, 400,000 that you just mentioned, if we look at it down 8 month period, we're looking at what, upwards of 800,000?
So 800 is your not to exceed. That's always going to be your max amount. If you were to do everything, we'll have that whole time period. I don't believe we were ever going to hit that full 800,000, but that's there as your not to exceed maximum. From our calculations, my calculations, we're looking at about 500,000, which I understand your concern. 65 to 500 is still a huge thing. But again, there were many factors that contributed to keeping Star CIO. We had numerous meetings. We had our vendors were not delivering on key safety programs. We had, like I said, my staff was shorthanded. They're down from half from the previous. A lot of work had been outsourced to vendors. There was numerous safety programs that were not being fulfilled by other vendors, and he was brought in to look at all these vendors and processes and programs and give us an overview. So as they're failing, as he's in, and they're failing and he's looking at them, we're also talking to numerous vendors. We're talking to New York State, Nice Tech it's called, their OGS technology consultants under the OGS contracts. They've done work over in the 911 center before. So we're talking to them about project management and independent valuation and verification of the vendors that already are sitting in there. We had deputy that was supposed to come in for IT as they're talking about splitting the departments and getting a CIO. They were going to bring in a deputy who had this kind of background and knowledge and experience in running these kind of public safety programs in his other job. And he had started some meetings and meeting with the vendors and meeting with the consultants. And we were very excited. He would have been a great addition and eventually probably would have turned into the CIO, but that fell apart. They counter offered him and he was pulled back from that. In the meantime, we already know that the solution proposed by the failing vendor is going to not work. So we're reaching out, we're working with the various vendors who can provide us the hardware, the software. What do we need? We're speaking to the vendors that actually own these programs. What do we need? What's the shortcomings? What's the issues? And, we're moving forward. We're not waiting, we're constantly looking at all the different things that we can do to, fix these issues that we have. And one by one, they all fell apart. Nice Tech was absolutely crushed, their words. It was impacting their ability to do new work. Like I said, the proposed deputy fell apart. He was counteroffered. He didn't come in. So as we're doing this, we're going along and we're like, we have to get to the next step. We have to order this, hardware that's so important. You can't have a system that without the correct hardware to run on it. And that was basically the crux of the one problem. You can't order that hardware until there's somebody to oversee the project. So we're constantly meeting, the high level meetings. It's ESC, it's the county executives, people, it's me, it's IT, it's the vendors. I mean, every week we're having meetings about how to move these very important the DA is obviously unhappy with the progress. This is a huge thing for him, his whole evidence discovery and his grants that's paying for these. I mean, he's anxious to make sure this succeeds. The county executive obviously is anxious to make sure these public safety things. So as we're moving along, one thing after another drops out. That's when we had to decide, what do we do? Do we stay with Isaac, who's been guiding us this whole time under Star CIO, or do we stop this altogether and go through that whole procurement process? And obviously, under the procurement policy, we have the ability to do that continuity extension. And after many months of one step forward and two steps back, that's what we opted to do, was to go into that continuity extension and continue those very important projects under him. He brought in the project managers to help move those along.
Thank you. Commissioner,
one of the things that have been raised as concerns is the relationship between some of our administrative staff and the Star CIO's, founder. Were you aware of that connection?
I was absolutely aware, yes, and as the county attorney pointed out in his letter, that is not prohibited under the county law, and there's many county relatives in here. I'm surprised after 17 years to find out sometimes who's still related to who, but it was no shock to me, and like I said, it's not prohibited.
Is it common practice for, I know that we have in the past seen, some contracts that will start at, lower amount and then balloon to something larger. Is it generally that common to see something go from 65,000 to 400,000, 500,000 without going through legislative process?
I don't believe the legislative process has anything to do with contracts.
No, that's, I'm just
Yeah.
asking.
Again, their continuity extensions are often done. I can't tell you the numbers. I'm not really an accounting person, but yes, I signed continuity here in general services. We do continuity extensions quite often for engineering firms as they're starting projects, et cetera. It's not an uncommon, everything that's been done has been standard operating procedure for as long as I've been in the department for 13 years.
In terms of, we also saw when we were looking at some of these contracts that some were signed by the deputy county executive, some were signed by the county executive himself. Is it, and maybe someone from the county attorney's office, who is actually eligible to sign those contracts?
That's not a question for me.
The county executive is the person that signs it, but he has a designate if he's not available in the county to sign those contracts. So that's where someone else will sign if in his absence.
And who is eligible to sign besides the county executive?
His deputy county executive, Harry Poor, as well as Alicia. If Harry is not available, then Alicia would be able to sign.
Because we do have one of the contracts that was signed by Alicia, not by the deputy county executive.
Correct. That would probably mean at that point, I don't personally know, but I would assume that he was not available and Harry was not in the office either.
I'm good for now. Okay, I'm gonna go to just the contracts, so bear with me. Do you have a copy with you of the
No, but
package?
I need.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one quick question?
Sure. Tom, you want to load in?
Absolutely. Take my ID right now.
Which is not in here, and I don't see unless it's been come out someplace else. Prior to contracting with Star, who were we contracting with? Was it UTC?
Yes, we had a CIO contracted under UTC.
And how long were we working with UTC?
In total or for that
Just roughly for a
CIO?
while. Yeah, for
We've
that.
been with UTC, I think they've been under the county since 2015.
Okay, because I do remember, I believe, Mr. Chairman, it was at Public Safety that the district attorney was in fact complaining about, all this storage is needed and the company wasn't doing the job. So, and you probably don't have those numbers we needed, but I'm sure UTC, going back to 2015, is probably millions of dollars that was spent by the county,
That's correct.
correct? Thank you.
All right, so I appreciate it if you just, you have the book, okay, perfect. So what I want to start with is the pricing, and then I'll go through the documents. Do we know who negotiated the 32.5? Was that negotiable, or was that just the quote, non-negotiable? How did that work? I know.
That was the quote. I don't know if there was any negotiations before I stepped in, but that
That would be
was
your
the-
role to negotiate it?
I could, yes.
Okay. You chose not to, or somebody else did? How that was-
Like I said, that was given to me at that point, so I don't know if there was any negotiations before that, but $65,000 for IT services to me was a fair and accurate price.
For 2 months? Okay, now, who writes the contract? And again, I know the answer to a lot of these questions, so I just want you to know that. I want the public to hear what you have to say, so I hope you're not frustrated by
No.
some of my questions.
Not at all.
I think
I
that a lot
prefer
of
to
this stuff
explain
has to
myself.
come out because
Absolutely.
of the allegations. So I'm not being adversarial, at least I hope you don't think
I don't
that.
take it.
Okay, so the contract, as far as you know, was not negotiated by you, but may have been by somebody
May
else?
have been.
Or is that the actual quote that you got?
That statement of work in the contract, I believe there was quotes before that.
From Star CIO?
Correct.
Okay, so it may have been negotiated. And who writes the contract? Does the county attorney write the contract, or does the vendor write the contract?
I would say that would be a mix. Carol, do you want to weigh on that? I mean, sometimes in technology, they prefer to use their own contracts, and in other things, the county attorney prefers to write the
Do you
contract.
know the answer with respect to these contracts? Who wrote them?
That is the vendor's contract, however, reviewed by the county attorney.
All right, so Star CIO wrote the contract. Okay, now with respect to the other bidders, I know we have documents in that package, which you're welcome to look at. It would be under tab 1. Secure Consulting, did somebody speak to them, or how did that work?
Securance is one of many vendors that what you have was not the full breadth of the research that we did to get Star CIO. They were one of many. We did speak to Securance after, but all of the GSA contracts that were put out can be sourced without speaking to the vendors.
All right, so was Secure Consulting one of those that was sourced, or one of them that provided a quote, or how did that work?
That was sourced. We did speak to them later on for other issues, but that one was just sourced GSA.
You just defined source for everybody?
I think I alluded to it, or more or less explained it in the beginning. When we go to piggybacking for federal and state contracts, those are quotes that have already gone through the entire procurement process under the state or the federal government. They've issued the request for proposals. They've gotten the vendor solicitations. They've vetted them. They've gone through the security and compliance. They've issued the contracts, and they've made those contracts available for us to use without any questions, without having to contact the federal government, the states, the vendors, or anything. Everything is there, contracted, signed, sealed, and delivered for us to go and use for quotes and comparables.
Okay, and the same with Gartner, or was that a quote?
Correct. Well, Gartner was a quote as well. It was a GSA contract. We had been speaking to them about various consulting positions for months before Star CIO came.
And when we need a service like this, do you advertise that, or you
It
just?
does not need to be legally advertised for professional
Right,
services.
but did you do that?
No.
Okay. Now, actually, into the contracts, which you should find under tab 2. And a lot was made about rush please on contract 1. Do you know who wrote rush please on that?
Could it have been me? I don't recall.
And why would you have done that?
Because we had the
If you did.
if I did it, which I might have, we had, like I said, when I came in, we were having issues with our vendors, and literally days before we had been told of, I was advised that there was quite an issue with vendors that needed to be looked at, and that's what Star CIO was bought in for.
Okay. And the particular contract 1, that was a 2-month contract for $65,000. And when you look at the second page, if you just turn the page, the box, a lot was made of the box. See quotes 25,000 to 99,999.
Correct.
Who checks that box or decides if that's appropriate?
That would be us. That would probably be me that did the cover sheet. That's exactly what it was. It was
Your department.
correct.
And that was good because it was a 2-month contract for $65,000.
Correct.
And so if you go back 1 page to the part that says rush please on it,
Mhm.
it says contract start date 1/15/23 to 7/14/23,
Mhm.
a 6-month period.
Right. So this contract, first of all, it started in the middle of COVID, when half of IT and general services was out. It's not meant to be a 2-month, like 1 week after another. There's time allotted for the fact that if we slipped into COVID and he misses 2 weeks, you always want to account for it. If you give yourself a 2-month, it wasn't meant to be a strictly 2 months. It was, he knew that he would not be here some weeks. He already had previous engagements. We knew that we would not be here some weeks. We already had conferences that we were scheduled. So for every week that we're not here or he's not here, you have to tack on, it's not strictly a 2-month calendar term. It's so many days of services under that 2 months. So
So,
time is allotted, extra time is allotted, knowing that you could go beyond the strictly calendar version of 2 months.
get into the payments later. That same document, it says lead negotiator for county, Alicia. Is that
That's
normal?
correct.
That she would have been the one to do that?
Yes,
And the first contract, was that one individual or multiple individuals?
it was Star CIO. I had no idea who worked under Star CIO. It's a corporation. I know a lot was made
But
of
it-
that, but I have,
Right, that's why I'm asking,
Right.
because in other contracts it changes.
right,
But in the first contract, as far as you know, it was one individual or others?
again, I never asked how many people worked in Star CIO, whether he had other people that he went to for recruiting. It was Star CIO, 65,000 as the corporation. I did not ask how many other people he had working underneath him, whether he paid secretaries, whether he paid other consultants. It wasn't, it wasn't relevant to the,
So in your initial conversation, it sounded like he was an extremely impressive individual, and that's why you went with him. He didn't share with you that he had other employees at that time?
it wasn't something I recall asking as
Okay.
to how many people were, encompassed Star CIO.
And do you know how much he was paid in that contract one before it was re-upped? I don't expect, you may not, I'm just asking, you may not.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I understand the question.
Well, 6 months times $32,500, $195,000.
No, but it's not 6 months, it's X amount of days in that 6-month period. Again, we gave extra time allotted for COVID, if somebody was to get sick and not be here for a month. It wasn't a strict calendar 2-month period. It was so many days within that calendar period.
But they worked more than 8 weeks under contract one, correct?
Yes, we were able to extend that period by 2-week increments from the first close. So we were still under our 100,000, exceeding the RFP level, but we were not anticipating to do that. Like I said, as we went along and the problems that came out of and snowball is how we ended up going further than anticipated with the 8-week, 2-month period.
Okay. Now I'm looking to contract two, which is in that same section. Find it myself. The contract two is the one that was pointed out was signed by Alicia, and I note that she wrote for Harry Ford, so it wasn't necessarily her signature. In other words, like a paralegal could sign for an attorney, I think, with permission, is that something that, or
Sorry,
is that not relevant?
which contract were you looking at?
Contract two is signed by Alicia D'Amico for, she wrote, I assume she wrote it for Harry Ford. So I'm assuming that he gave her the permission or direction to do that.
I believe so.
And then now with contract two, the scope of the work changes, right? Because now we say description of service. The description of service in contract one was fairly limited. Where in contract two, now we have a program manager that was going to upgrade the CAD, that was going to deal with niche, RMS, that's the emergency services things you were referring to, and some network upgrades. So is that a new contract? Because you're talking about all different things that weren't part of the first contract?
Well, the first contract, the consultant is to perform assessing technology data, vendors, organizational model as directed. And what we did was extend that. So he had somebody underneath him, as you were asking, did he have anybody underneath him in the first contract? Here we're putting a second person to specifically focus on those CAD and niche programs. What they needed was a network architect, because as I said, the hardware was the most important component of that. That's what this second contract does. It extends Isaac's oversight and brings in his consultants underneath him to help facilitate those.
And how many
That
people
he's
did you
already
ask him to
looking at.
provide with that contract to?
That contract is only one person.
Himself and one other?
Right.
All right. So the first contract is one person then, as you understand it?
Again, that's a question that I didn't ask. Was Isaac our primary contact? Yes, I don't know who Isaac has underneath him.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm asking is that the people who presented on the steps of the government center said it was one person making 800,000. You're
Well,
here to say
that would be
You're here to
incorrect.
say that's not so.
Right, so we have Isaac is 65,000 for each one of his 2-month stints, and then he's brought in a project manager for 200,000.
And that contract is, the second contract, which you have in front of you, is signed by Alicia on 7/13/23. And at some point, you issued a letter, that continuing extension letter,
Yes, that's the continuity extension.
but the date of that letter was in June. What triggered you to write that in June?
So after many, many months, like I said, we had vendors in and out talking, and we had the vendors that were working on the hardware. We have the Nice Tech people. Around June, everything is where it kind of comes to a head. You have the deputy who was supposed to come in, he backs out in May. We're talking to the consultants for Nice Tech. That's when they tell me we're too busy to pick up stuff. We're absolutely crushed right now. We have got to get the hardware ordered because the project needs to move forward. The DA at this point has said, I'm not going to pay for anything right now until you kind of fix all these problems. ESC we had a meeting in June with the ESC, the CE's office, myself, where we said, where do we go from here? You know, we need to order this hardware. We've already figured it all out. We've been working with the vendors. We're kind of at the put up or shut up point. So we write the continuity extension because we failed with Nice Tech. We don't have a deputy. We've decided that Isaac's really the person that's been moving this project forward. We're going to continue with him, and that's what your continuity extension dated in June is. And as you know,
Is there
it
another
takes-
contract that we don't have, this extension?
that extension fits for the amendment that you're speaking of.
I'm just looking at a letter addressed to nobody dated June 19, 2023.
That's actually not the right letter, but there's one that's signed and addressed by the county executive. That's not sure where
'Cause
that.
This is the information we got, I
I-
believe, from Mr. Goldman's office at the request of so a few of the members of the Democratic
That's not
Caucus.
that's not the extension that I have in mind.
So we're missing a contract, at least one?
No, you're not missing a contract. That's the continuity. It says the same thing. That continuity extension absolutely applies for this amendment.
I don't have anything signed by Mr. Newhouse. And you think that was signed in June? In other words, you wrote the letter June 19th, so someone in the county exec's office
Correct.
signed something in June
Yes,
to extend the contract?
correct.
So we don't have that. If you
They can provide that.
Please get us
We can
that.
get-
Yeah, that was confusing, and I think that may have been confusing to the presenters because the second contract was dated in July, and the extension letter is the 19th, but they weren't given those documents. So I personally found that confusing as well, so I think we need to clarify that a little bit. And then I'm gonna move to contract 3. And the date at the top of that contract is 1/15/23 to 1/14/24. So now we're into, I guess, a full year period. And again, the box is checked that it's under $100,000. How does that square up? Because that was one of
So
the issues pointed out.
the date on amendment 1, the second contract that you're speaking of, is actually through 1/14/2024 at that point. So the second one that you just asked about, that's a
Right.
continuation of this first amendment that we just talked about, continuity.
But don't you have to change the box when you know the number's over
So
100,000?
these aren't new contracts. These are extensions of the current contract. And if you look at the top of the page above that box, you'll see at the very top of the page, it'll say renewal, extension, change orders, amendment. And that box is checked. It says this is an extension, change order, or amendment of a contract at the top of page 2. That's what applies to the amendments. Yes, the original one still applies. It was still sourced originally under the quotes. That hasn't changed, but there's an extension clause checked off above at the top of page 2.
And then the scope of the work changes. Again, in contract 3, we're talking about Chronos, UI path, I don't even know what that means, Windows, PMO. Those are all new issues.
They're not new. That's part of Isaac's assessment of technology. When we bring in the first project manager for the CAD niche, that's only looking at the 911 systems. Isaac was brought in to help IT move forward. And this is what the second project manager is focusing. They're finally focusing on the IT department because we've been pushed back and the focus has been on the failing 911 public safety projects. So the second project manager is to help us catch up with our projects that have now been deferred by 8 months because we are focusing on those public safety projects.
And how many employees came with contract 3?
One
Additional or the same one?
one additional.
So now we're up to 3?
That's correct.
And let's see. Oh, your former role, you were in the compliance department of general services?
It's all the same. It's all procurement. I started as a contract coordinator. I became the director of compliance and I moved to deputy and then I moved to commissioner.
Right, but does a compliance person review this stuff to see that it
Absolutely.
fits? And did that happen in your office?
Absolutely.
And who would that have been to review these 3 contracts
Me,
from a compliance standpoint?
me.
So they didn't have a separate compliance person?
No, I had no deputy for IT and my deputy that came in under procurement was not county oriented or procurement oriented. He came from the private sector and he was learning. And I did not have a director of compliance at that time that I had, because the one that was filled in when I left the position left for another position in December previously.
So you didn't have a compliance person, you didn't have a deputy, it was all on you?
I'm chief cook and bottle washer, unfortunately.
I guess so.
It's been a lot.
After you heard all those criticisms from outside, did you watch the video?
I did
Is there anything that you would have done differently as a result of those
anything.
criticisms?
I believe I followed my procurement policy. My only comment would be, I don't know how they came up with all of their answers when they didn't ask anybody any questions that did the work.
Okay, I'm gonna take a break, Mr. Fagione.
Kevin Darren has his hand up. He can go first. I just gotta get my thoughts together.
I have a few more questions. And again, my apologies if some of it seems a little bit repetitive, but I could get more information. Again, we're just trying to get, as fast as we can. So again, this is not a personal attack of any sort. I want to go back to the actual selection of the folks. You know, you just mentioned that you're not necessarily required to go and really go in deep for some of the contracts. You know, we have federal, state, we know that some of these have, you know, they're in the system, we can go into that system, we can say, okay, this one has had a reputation of doing great work, we're gonna look at them, and that's part of the 3. But it seems like this particular contract had a lot more of what we need, and it looked like it was very specifically tailored for us. Would you say that would be accurate?
This was, yes, very specific.
So comparatively, if we were to look at the other contracts, they necessarily wouldn't have been able to, if we would have reached out to them, they too could have potentially given us a very tailored, contract that met our specifications.
So generally, when you're getting a quote from somebody that is not already awarded, I've gone through the contract process, there's already an established contract for OGS and GSA. When you're getting a quote, you're asking them, what can you do for the county and how much is it going to cost?
Mhm.
So with the OGS and GSA ones, that's already been established. You already have years of experience, what their services are, what their prices are. You don't have to do that. You have to do that when you're asking a vendor that isn't already under contract, because most people don't post their services and prices for us to be able to go. So you have to call them up and say, what can you offer us? When you're looking at the GSA and OGS, they are multi-page solicitations. GSA proposals are 1,000+ pages. everything's already been detailed in there, that all that work has already been done when you're looking at OGS and GSA. So to say that it's not tailored, yes, we had conversations with Gartner. We knew what their advisory services were going to be. We knew what they offered. This was not a, hey, we have something very specific and here is a very generic comparison. These comparisons were well documented, well thought out solicitations by the federal and state governments, and they are much better at this than we are. So
You said you had conversations with Gartner?
there was, yes, emails between Gartner and the department.
Is that something that would be able to share?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, okay, so as we have these contracts, this one was a little bit more detailed because it didn't generally work with the county.
Right.
So it had a lot more detail. You had mentioned that Alicia was the one who kind of brought this person as having special, the specialized needs that we could be utilized here in the county. Do you recall how that came to be, or how that?
You would have to ask that question.
You had mentioned throughout the conversation that you didn't necessarily know, for example, how many people worked underneath Isaac, or who made up the company. Some of the allegations that were made outside, I'm sure you mentioned you saw the video. Some of them talked about issues that anyone hearing this kind of like had our eyes, kind of glued to. Issues around liability insurance, about not having potentially or allegedly not having a location, not being registered. Some of those things I imagine must have been concerning to you too, to hear them. Since then, have you been able to look into those allegations?
So the liability insurance was taken care of by Risk. That's their job in this process, where you see that Risk has signed off on that. That was addressed immediately by Risk. They said, hey, we're missing this or we're missing that. I've submitted many contracts, as are most departments have submitted to Risk. That's their job to review that and go, hey, this doesn't match, this is expired, this isn't filled out, that the county is additionally insured in this. But that was all addressed and signed off for by Risk when the very first contract went through. And in order for Risk to have those appropriate New York State mandated, New York State workers' comp and disability, those certificates are produced by New York State, which meant that he was a registered business that New York State recognized. Otherwise, he would not have had those insurance certificates that were provided in the original contract. So I don't believe that those assumptions made on the steps are correct.
So you're saying that the assumptions that were made were, one, that they didn't have liability insurance. You're saying that that's factually incorrect.
Correct.
You're saying that they are a registered business entity because they wouldn't have been able to do business with otherwise. Is that
They
correct?
wouldn't have those in New York State insurances, correct?
And so you had no concerns when, like, you were certain when you saw these allegations that was absolutely factually inaccurate.
Yes. As well as the statement that Gartner wasn't contacted.
Another question and this is not necessarily for you, but anyone in the room who wants to take it. How is more, looking at the,
Well, the questions have to be for the commissioner. I'm not taking questions.
okay, I mean, but she
They're
also.
open to come.
You had mentioned, when we were looking at one of the contracts that Alicia might sign on occasion, if deputy county executive. How often or how regularly does that happen?
I have no idea. I can't speak to that.
When you looked at these contracts, you said that one of the main reasons why this contract stuck out was because you felt that it would be able to kind of tailor itself better to our needs. You had someone you can actually reach out to. But looking at something that goes from 65,000 and balloons to it, you must have imagined, oh wow, this is getting a little bit probably out of hand, more than you guys expected it to. Was there the cutoff was always going to be, you said 800,000? That was kind of like we were going to say, okay, we're never going to go above that. It was never, if we were to hire a full-time person, we're seeing in other counties, you have people who get paid less than 200,000 for a full-time position. Here we're paying 65,000 for a person who's working for 2 months. It seems like a substantially large jump between someone who'd be full-time and someone who's working only for 2 months, kind of sporadic.
I hear a couple different questions in that, and I will say that, as noted, I had comparables that a CIO position for this area would go anywhere from $300 and something thousand dollars to $465,000. So if you're asking me if I thought the price overall was exorbitant, no. Isaac's portion would have netted out to be $360, I believe, with a 6-month period. The other two people that came up on, the two project managers, absolutely in line with other comparables, 218 and 200 even, I know that that's absolutely in line. Like I said, I went to industry standards, looked at other contracts that we have, they're absolutely in line with what we were paying. As far as, maybe I'm missing a part of your question. Do you want to repeat it? Did I miss a part?
So one of the big ones was, if we were to look at, for example, other counties in similar positions, would you say that that price point would be similar to what we would have?
I
for
am
those
only
kinds of
aware of one other county that actually has a contracted CIO position right now, and that's Nassau, who is adjacent to Suffolk.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what they're getting paid, but I don't believe that in the private world for our consultants is anywhere out of line, like Legislator Slassie alluded to. We have multi-million-dollar contracts with other vendors, and this was absolutely in line with those other multi-million-dollar contracts that we have with those vendors.
Tom?
Real quick, somewhere in here, I did see a liability payment for $10,300. So
I'm not sure.
what's in there, it's like checked off, and it was through Star and the county in terms of, liability. I see there was insurance on it. And I believe Dan Castro Cohen signed off on it. I don't know where I saw it, but I remember seeing it.
The certificates of insurance are in our
All right,
package
they're in there. I saw.
for both workers'
Yeah.
comp and liability.
Okay, thank you.
You want to go now, Tom, or you want?
Sure,
to
I
defer?
was getting my thoughts together, I was just writing down my notes, as I like to do sometimes. Commissioner, first of all, early on, you said that you've had 13 years' experience in the procurement area. Wow, I can tell by your information today, you definitely have brought your information here, and you way more professional than I am with all this. And so I just have a couple questions. There were some comments made on October 25th in regards to these contracts and the circumstances before us here. Would you say that this is a scam? Would you consider any of this a scam?
Absolutely not. This was done to protect Orange County residents, protect our systems, protect our IT. I said, this all came about, the watershed moment was Suffolk County went down. What would that do to us if that happened to us? That was my entire concern. What's the plan? How do we address these shortcomings?
There was another phrase used on October 25th, and it's the phrase due diligence. In your professional opinion, as our Commissioner of General Services and IT, would you say that you and your department have exercised due diligence in these matters?
We exercised our due diligence. I don't know if the accusations presented had exercised their due diligence.
Would you also say that, and a quote, if someone were to say this, make no mistake, this contract is in direct violation of the public procurement policy of Orange County. Is that an accurate statement?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And the last question I have is, over the course of October 24th and 25th, were you contacted by any legislators in regards to these contracts or the questions related
Nobody's
to
ever
this?
asked me any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
All right, so, since again, you are our procurement expert, I just want to have you walk us through the continuing extension and where that fits into our purchase policy. I think it's section 10. It would be,
Section.
in the book in
10,
front of you, it would be under tab 4, would be the purchasing policy. If you could just direct us to the right page and explain it, not only to us, but to the public. Yeah, I think it's part 10, letter B, which is the,
Letter B is the breakdown of the solicitation thresholds under $25,000. I'll wait until everybody's on. the
yeah,
same
it's
page.
towards the end. It's probably like 10 pages from the end.
There's no page numbers on this
I know.
particular copy.
Yes.
Part 10,
part
part
10.
X.
Then you're gonna look at capital letter B.
So A, actually, if you look under A, that gives you what professional services encompass under the law in New York. Specialized technical skills, expertise, training license, blah, blah, blah. B is the breakdown of the thresholds of what the procurement policy establishes for the methods that you have to procure them legally. 0 to 25 is department discretion, $25,001 to $9,999 is procuring agencies, it's your 3 written solicitations, and $100,000 is up is our professional RFP request for proposals. And then C on the next page is your exemptions. And your continuity exemption would be C1 and purchase orders and contracts for existing projects that require the continuity of professional services to ensure the proper completion of the project. What you have to do for number 2 is you have to have a justification for that exemption, and you have to answer the 3 questions under part 22 in the back of the procurement policy, which is if you look at your continuity exemption in your amendment number 1 of that contract, that's what that letter is.
And it's your contention that these were not new projects, just a continuation?
That's correct. He was brought in to assess our vendors, our technology, and if it goes back to the,
And that your original thought was that the 2-month period was gonna be sufficient, or the 8 weeks of work would be sufficient? And that's why you didn't do an RFP?
correct.
Okay, anybody else? Go.
I believe it was back in August, there was a Ways and Means meeting where it was discussed about, having the need to actually have someone hired for that.
Right.
As far as I know, and I think one of the legislators even alluded to that, who sits on that committee, mentioned that this contract was never brought up during that meeting. Is there a reason why that might happen?
I don't know what one would have had to do with the other. He was an advisor. He was not meant to be a CIO permanently, if that's your question.
It was in my second.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this was a roadmap. He was brought in to look at all of our data, our processes, our vendors, our everything, and give us an idea of, as I said, how to prioritize the safety and security of this IT department moving forward, because there was so much to do in light of Suffolk County being breached.
So it was never expected that just like we had continued with this person who had done all these things and got us to where we were, there was never an expectation that they might actually get hired on as.
No, absolutely not. First of all, we couldn't afford them.
I can imagine so.
But that's what we were interviewing, and this is, I believe, Deputy County Executive Harry Poor had proposed splitting this department years ago. I know he's alluded to that. So this was something that we knew was going to happen the whole time. They were looking to split the department. They were looking to bring in a CIO with that kind of vision and oversight. This was something that we knew was going to happen. And when I said that not to exceed 800,000, I mean, if we had somebody that eliminated the need for Isaac's expertise and guidance for us, he could have been terminated at that time and he wouldn't have gone any farther, but that didn't happen. I believe that the deputy position fell through. They put the legislative request in July to split the department and create the CIO position. That went through the processes. It didn't get approved till September. As soon as that got approved, there was the ad that was put out. They started recruiting. I mean, so this has been in the works for, overlapping this whole process the entire time. And like I said, if we had somebody, we wouldn't have needed to continue this any further. And that, we're never going to reach the 800,000, but we wouldn't have needed to even go to the 500 that I anticipate that we're going to leave off.
My final question, and my apologies, I'm gonna go back. You had mentioned that Alicia was the one who had indicated or mentioned that this company, Star CIO policy. She mentioned other businesses?
Yes, Alicia was the one that also bought in Gardner. Gartner.
And when she mentioned this particular company, was there any reason why they choose just any other companies that were out of county or out of state?
Again, Alicia had been the deputy commissioner overseeing IT since 2019. Alicia is the one that drove most of the projects in IT forward. She was always looking for something that would help the IT department in completing the jobs.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, Chairman, I told you I'd only have a couple questions, but they generated from the information today. Commissioner, quick question for you. You mentioned Suffolk County twice. I remember Alicia D'Amico coming to that committee meeting and talking about the role of IT. And at that time, she had mentioned about the Suffolk data breach and the problems down there. Do you have any information of approximate how much money in terms of how much it cost Suffolk County with that data problem?
So Suffolk County was down, did not recoup normal operations for almost a year. They'd just gotten back to normalcy. It cost them $16 million in recovery fees. I can't tell you how many millions of dollars of inconvenience to the residents and lost business that they had for being down for a whole year.
Astronomical.
That's, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Cyber security costs this country billions of dollars a year, billions. We're not talking backyard hackers. This is how nation states that are making their money these days when they have sanctions and go there, but yes, this is big business for bad guys.
Scary stuff, very scary.
So I guess my last question will be, are you happy with the services of Star CIO?
I am very happy. Isaac has been a huge help to us. We've moved many projects. He has guidance and vision that nobody in this department, I believe, would have been able to recognize things, and certainly has given us the tools and the questions to ask, vetting vendors, looking for, services. Absolutely. He's been very helpful and has definitely moved projects along for us.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Anybody need a break or we ready to keep going? Okay, so to the public, I'm gonna turn the sound off. We'll take a 5-minute break. We'll leave the camera on, turn the sound off, and then we'll start, Mr. Chapman, if you're prepared in 5 minutes. But we'll start with that. And just so the public knows, Mr. Chapman will be the only other person to present to us today. Everybody else on the list, or most of the others on the list, will be presenting on the 20th. So I'm gonna turn the camera off, but the meeting is still going on. We're just taking a brief pause. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the public out there. It's 10:17. We're going to again start the meeting, and our first order of business is going to be to set our next date after, our next meeting will be November 20th at 9 a.m. And the meeting after that will be, assuming everybody in the committee agrees, November 21st, 2023 at 1 p.m. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
And the county exec has indicated he can be available during that time frame. So the plan would be to speak to the county executive at that time and also anybody that we don't get to on Monday, if we don't get to anybody. We all agree on that?
Sounds great, Chairman.
All right, so that's the housekeeping issue. Now, I guess we're ready to go with Commissioner Chapman. Would you like to tell us anything first before we ask you questions? I assume you do.
I do.
All right, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, and I'll let you know up front, depending on the speed of my read, I'll be talking for approximately 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay.
Just want to prepare everybody here. I've been silent on these allegations to date, which some of you have said is uncharacteristic of me. But I was waiting for the opportunity to speak the truth in front of the legislature and not at some press conference with reporters who in some cases have their own very personal agendas. Thank you for this important opportunity. This is the last job of my career, Commissioner of Human Resources. I put my all into it. And anyone who has paid attention to how I've done the job at HR knows that. We rewrote our correction officer and PBA contracts, taking us from lagging in the industry to leading. We took an objective approach to reviewing salaries with your support, and we've made important changes. We've made it easier to apply for county jobs, redeveloped our employment website, shifting marketing strategies, and trying to attract new staff. And before I get into a lot of details about some of the malicious and false things said, let me say a word to my career staff in my office, oftentimes lifelong HR professionals, from my 2 deputy commissioners to our newest employee who's just about to graduate college. I'm sorry for the annoyance you've had to respond to questions from your friends and family about your still relatively new boss. You work hard, you're decent people, you shouldn't be subjected to this. But hopefully after I finish today, you will be able to simply tell your friends and tell your family, that guy James Skoufis is just another Albany politician telling lies to try to get reelected, because that is what this is all about. And I want to say something to my family, my sister-in-law, their 2 children, my kids, and most of all, to my mother-in-law, who is really wanted to be here today. She had chemo yesterday, it was her first treatment. And it's odd, you make a lot of mother-in-law jokes. We have a great family. If you look at the favorites on my cell phone, you'll see her there. She has been so hurt and maligned by these allegations, I just can't tell you. You don't see a lot of families ever be attacked by a career politician, but that's what's happened here. My in-laws knew I was in politics and government when I started dating their daughter. They never really loved it, but they know my wife and I worked hard. We've raised 2 wonderful kids, one of whom is probably watching at his one college and the other who's probably watching at his other. But their family should never have been victimized by the lie of some hack Albany politician who raises money off special interests and is trying to cover his own tracks of making our communities less safe simply to make up allegations. And lastly, of course, to my wife, who is here. This week, we will celebrate the 32nd anniversary of our first date. We saw Cape Fear, a thriller movie. When you said yes for better or for worse, you probably never imagined Joe McCarthy Jr. would try to malign you and your entire family. We made it through my working in Albany for 14 years as a married couple. Some people can't even stay faithful to their spouse for 2 years when they go to Albany. And I'm so sorry that your family's been victimized by this political hack, James Skoufis, and his local lackeys on this county legislature, not the people sitting here today. And most importantly, to my sister-in-law's brilliant husband, who needed this work in Orange County like he needed a hole in the head. Don't be discouraged by a hack. You were lied about, as I will discuss, and you have your legal remedies, and I'm sure you will take them. But don't let his lies discourage you from public service if ever you have future opportunities. The reality is I'm asked for my contacts and advice by a lot of different people on a lot of different subject matters. That's what happens when you've been counseled to 3 Senate committees, chief legal advisor to not 1, but 2 different branches of county government in 2 different counties, negotiated hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of state law, worked on the state budget for hundreds of millions of dollars, participated in very complex negotiations, been counseled to 9 different cities, towns, and villages across 3 counties. You are asked for your insight and your contacts and your advice from an awful lot of people, including many in this county legislature. Alicia D'Amico, the county's Director of Operations and Cost Containment, is one such person who asked for my advice and contacts. On or about November 22nd, could have been 23rd, but roughly, Alicia, who works directly, 2022. Alicia, who works directly for the county executive. She came to me to express a concern that a contractor, who to date we've spent over $8 million with according to the finance department, may not be doing what they're supposed to be doing. You just heard Commissioner Swikata, I believe, refer to people as failing vendors. Alicia was very blunt. She thought millions were being spent and was not sure the results were there. She heard concerns from career Orange County staff about money being spent without results. She also knew, though, that you can't grandstand or shoot from the hip and make allegations. You need an independent review. Alicia wanted to get the facts, no nonsense, no favoritism. Alicia told me she needed someone competent in doing a real assessment of our IT situation, someone other than the current vendor, the one being paid those millions, to see if the county was being taken for a ride, or perhaps we weren't being taken for a ride. She did not know. What Alicia said to me about a year ago was actually something two people in this room heard in a private meeting about 7 weeks ago, before Skoufis's lies were made public. The chairwoman and the majority leader and I were all meeting with the district attorney and two of his staff in a closed-door meeting downstairs in her office. The DA told us that 2 years ago, he had agreed to give the county over $1 million in state grant money to the county for IT purposes, that the funding was being handled by a contractor and that nothing was getting done. And it was so bad, in fact, that the State DA's Association suggested to him that he should even sue the county for the money back. If I'm misstating that, the majority leader and chairman are right here, right now, and I ask they correct me. Your silence speaks. And I make that point because the conversation with the DA, which took place in the chairwoman's office before the Skoufis allegations were made, corroborates the very concern Alicia had raised the year before about the speed of IT projects and the spending of public money. A contractor was getting a lot of money and the projects weren't getting done, and there were questions. I told Alicia I knew someone who specialized in what was called digital transformation. He literally wrote 2 books on the subject matter. Literally two books on digital transformation. He's gone on national speaking tours, is routinely hired by major companies to handle this exact issue. I gave him the title of the book and the individual's resume. I deliberately did not tell Alicia that Isaac Sokolow was my sister-in-law's husband until she came to her own conclusion that she did want to talk to him. I wanted to ensure that Alicia considered this on the merits without even a hint of nepotism, which invades so many local governments all over the place, sometimes in very troubling ways. Alicia called me back after reviewing Isaac's resume and rather emphatically said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, it was an oral conversation, "Why haven't you told me about this guy before? How could you be keeping him from me?" I told her I'd known him for 25 years, more than that. I told him actually he's married to my wife's sister. Alicia was almost angry that I had kept such an expert on technology out of her knowledge base and had not shared him with me because I knew her strong interest in IT issues, as you heard Commissioner Swikata also speak to. Realistically, I had no idea if Isaac would even want to do government work because I knew his background in the private sector, and quite frankly, I knew he just didn't need the money. He only works when he wants to work, not when he needs to. He's just that good. She said she wanted to talk to him. My next step was to actually then go to Isaac and go, "Hey, would you talk to Orange County?" I didn't even know if he'd be interested. I told Isaac at the same time, there's a perception that the current vendor may not be doing what they were supposed to be doing, or they may be doing everything, but it was millions of dollars being spent. And obviously we cannot rely on the vendor to give a straight picture of their own self-worth. After Alicia said she wanted to speak with Isaac, I emphasized to her orally and in writing, Isaac is my brother-in-law, and accordingly, while I would not have any formal role in his retention, in any event, keep me out of any and all discussions. Told her that orally, told her that in writing. At the time, November 28th, 2022. From there, I knew nothing about Star CIO's contract terms, hours, any extensions, or the amounts until the county attorney told me about them 3 to 4 weeks ago. I do not have a copy of the contract. I have not read the contract. I have not seen the contract. I did not negotiate the contract's terms or amounts and have had no involvement whatsoever with vetting of the contract. Let me be very clear. I'm 51 years old. I have 30 years in the state pension system. I am eligible to retire and I will retire when I'm 55. So yes, with my breadth of experience, I'm consulted on a lot of different governmental issues. And I ask for contacts I may have by a lot of smart people, both in this county, in this room, and outside. Some of whom take my advice, some of whom do not. Let me say it again, though, and you're going to hear it a third time. I knew nothing about Star CIO's contract terms, hours, any extensions, or the amounts until the county attorney told me the details 3 to 4 weeks ago. I do not have a copy of the contract. I have not read the contract. I did not negotiate its terms, nor have any involvement with the vetting of the contract. In normal circumstances, what I just said, I would say, thank you, have a good day, and that puts the matter to bed. I wish it were the case, but it doesn't. Because of the volume of lies told by your 4 colleagues in the county legislature and our state senator. Ladies and gentlemen, credibility, ladies in the room, gentlemen at the table, credibility is slowly earned, but is also quickly lost. When politicians start making claims, but really have no proof, just their own speculation, which is tainted by personal hate and bias, they better be especially careful. Because when the foundation of their claim is rotten, the entire house falls. And here, the Scoofus Foundation is entirely rotten. I'm now going to cover 5 different points. 1, the legality of the contracts and conflicts of interest. 2, IT staffing and county legislator, not yours, hypocrisy. 3, James Scoofus's lies and political motivations. And 4 or 5, depending on how you combine them, the false information put forth by some county legislators who are really just acting as James Scoofus's surrogates, sometimes literally on his books. The legality of the contracts. They've been addressed by the county attorney, and I won't try to practice law again and explain the legality. He's already done so. But you'll get no better or more ethical guidepost in terms of giving you legal advice than the county attorney. He's what's called an AV-rated attorney. That means the highest rating of an attorney. He served on the county ethics board and was elected by his community as judge over and over again. I can't speak to the contracts because, as I've told you, I've never read them, nor do I have a copy of them. But let me talk about hiring people who you know or even are related to from an HR perspective. From an HR perspective, and it's something that happens all the time, whether you like it or not. Hiring someone you know or hiring someone you know who knows someone is not only perfectly legal, it's common, whether one wishes to admit it or not. And it certainly is common in this county government, as is in many across the state. I'll give you a few examples. And I cast no aspersions with these examples. I'm giving you real life situations. Not all of you legislators have children, but of those who do, 3 of them had jobs or have jobs in county government. We have multiple sets of siblings hired in county government. I literally have 3 directors in the HR department. 2 of them are siblings. I didn't even know it. There are husbands and wives in county government. There are parents and children in county government. Accusations of conflict are easy to make. Proof, though, of actual conflict is what is necessary. Some legislators have asked me to help get close friends jobs. Is that a conflict? Not at all. I kind of do that all the time. I help people find jobs. Some legislators have asked for jobs for their child. Is that a conflict? Mr. Hines, I'm sorry to single you out, but you work for a major trial law firm that sues the county. Not a lot, but occasionally they do, and they're a great firm. Yet here you are sitting on the Rules Committee that has financial oversight of the county attorney's office that your firm sues. Is that a conflict? I'll tell you, I was the county attorney. It is not. Another legislator literally sits on the committee that has oversight of his own daughter's boss, me. When I became commissioner of HR, I was faced with a decision, my call, whether I should make that legislator's daughter permanent in her position or let her go. It was an easy choice because she's great. But what if she wasn't? It sure could have been a conflict, and clearly something some people might want to try to avoid. Even though her father and I argue pretty vociferously, at the end of the day, she stands on her own 2 feet and does a great job. So allegations are easy to make, but when you're going to make allegations, you better be able to prove them. Talking about IT staffing from an HR perspective in this county, the county's IT area has always had a lot of consultants, to my knowledge. As I've noted, we've spent millions of dollars on consultants on just one company in recent years. Add that to other consultants, and it's a lot more. Why? The reality is we had a deputy commissioner of IT, which was filled by 3 different people over less than 5 years, and the last time the position was filled was in May of 2020. Let's talk about that for a moment. The new House administration actually proposed to create a CIO position to try and move away from contractors. That request to create the position was part of the budget discussions in 2021, but ultimately was rejected at the Ways and Means Committee in October of 2021. The new House administration pointed out at the time that the contractors we had cost a lot of money and wanted to bring the CIO in-house in October of 2021, 2 years ago. And contractors certainly do cost money. As noted, we've spent over $8 million on one contractor with multiple extensions and expansions of those contracts. So when Senator Skoufis stood on his soapbox and called out contract number 1 with Star CIO, the reality is it's nowhere near contract number 1 with Information Systems Consulting. I've seen 10 contracts and extensions worth over $8 million on one vendor alone. And as I said, we have more than one IT vendor. Skoufis also wanted to imply that it was somehow a sneaky effort to hire Star CIO by arguing the contract had the words "please rush" written across the top. The reality, he had 4 legislators standing behind him. The reality, had Skoufis bothered to do even a little bit of fact checking, or 4 legislators who actually get paid by the county to know what's going on, bothered to do a little bit of fact checking, he and they would have found out that numerous contracts had the words "please rush" written across the top, including 4 here from another IT vendor. Writing the word "rush" on contracts is so common for a simple reason. We generally like to have contracts in place with vendors before they perform services. As county attorney, I saw contracts with the words "please rush" written on them constantly. And I want to make it clear, I'm not questioning the propriety, this is important, it's all important. I want to make this clear though, I'm not questioning the propriety of any of these other contracts. I don't have the technical skills to do so, or the ability to speak in any detail on IT. So as I indicated though, in October of 2021, from an HR perspective, the new House administration proposed a CIO. The new House proposed an in-house staff person to move us away from these contracts. It was considered as part of the budget process, it was rejected. No hard feelings, that's the nature of the budget process. 2 years later, we have a new department with a local law in place. And that plan is coming to fruition. Democracy, it doesn't always work fast, but as has been very plainly said by many others, it's the best alternative to any form of government. There were 4 county legislators joining Senator Skoufis's rant about having a contract with a CIO. And now we get into some great hypocrisy. Legislator Paduch, he was one of them ranting against a contracted CIO. The problem for Mr. Paduch is he actually voted against funding for a county staff person to be a county employee CIO in October of 2021, as proposed by the new House administration. So it was his no vote, and that of others who rejected attempts 2 years ago to bring the CIO in-house, why the job was contracted out. If Mr. Paduch and the politicians who joined him want to know why the county contracted a CIO, it's because of their own actions. Mr. Anagnostakis, who railed against the contracted CIO, also voted against having a county employee for a CIO back in October of 2021 at the same Ways and Means meeting. Mr. Anagnostakis also voted against the local law in September of 2023, which created the Department of Information Services to be led by a county employee CIO. The county had a contractor, the county wanted to bring the position in-house for 2 years. Paduch voted against it once, Anagnostakis voted against it twice. Maybe if Anagnostakis showed up for work more at the county, rather than being on Senator Skoufis's payroll with a second taxpayer-funded job, he would have actually known these things. That's why we don't have an in-house CIO. The position was only created after he and his colleagues voted it down 2 years ago, and his colleagues, not him, agreed to create it just a few months ago. Maybe he will vote for the position at the 3rd try when the position comes up for formal confirmation next month before this legislature. So when Albany politician James Skoufis claims I should have filled the position of CIO, he needs to ask his own staffer, Michael Anagnostakis, why he voted not once but twice to not even create the position. But Skoufis knows this. This is just more noise from Skoufis. Throw up allegations against the wall, prove nothing, and hope anything sticks. But the bottom line is clear. Paducah and Anagnestakis voted to stop funding for a CIO in 21. Anagnestakis voted against the local law creating the CIO just 2 months ago. And his boss, James Skoufis, wonders why a job hasn't been filled when it doesn't even exist. Give me a break. But that's what you do when you have no record to run on. You lie instead. I've only scratched the surface of James Skoufis' misinformation. Seriously, watching 3 politicians from Albany, Skoufis, Ickes, and Jacobson, hold a press conference in Goshen to tell Orange County how to run a government is literally the height of hypocrisy. New York State lost 545,000 people last year alone due to the incompetent policies of the New York State government. Mr. Skoufis himself is the king of pay-to-play. He took over $500,000 in campaign aid from Airbnb and then sponsors legislation to help them. The guy's entire career has been made by attacking Curious Joel in order to get elected. But then he solicits and takes the Curious Joel block vote, which he would have lost his re-election with last year without. But when you have no record to run on, you make up lies about other people. Cuomo's nursing home death mandate, James Skoufis was asked to investigate. He failed our seniors. Governor Hochul's no-bid $637 million COVID contract. Silent James Skoufis won't stand up to the governor. And of course, we all know that when someone bigger than him comes along, James Skoufis does the only natural thing a bully does, runs in the bathroom and hides rather than confront someone more powerful than him, because that's what a bully does. But beyond his pathetic records as a senator, I want to directly confront some of James Skoufis' actual lies he told. Lie number 1, Skoufis claimed I should have hired a CIO at the start of 2023. We've already established, and you know this as legislators, that I have no authority to hire a CIO because the position was not even created until the local law was passed in September of 2023, a local law his own staff person voted against. Lie number 2, Skoufis claims the contracts were a no-bid contract, when in fact the procurement policy of the county, passed by the legislature in December of 21, expressly provides for hiring professional services by request for proposals, not by bid. He could have asked his staffer, Michael Anagnestakis, if that was a procurement policy. Mr. Anagnestakis, though, probably couldn't tell him. He was absent for that vote. But Skoufis' other former staffer, Lori Tautel, was here. She voted for the very procurement policy he's claiming was not followed. Lie number 3 was Skoufis' claim that Star CIO's insurance expired. It didn't. But Skoufis was so desperate to cling on to anything and everything, he just said whatever he could. Lie number 4, though, is truly evil. Skoufis falsely claimed that my sister-in-law and her husband's home was in foreclosure in February of 2023, just as the Star CIO contract was being entered into by the county. Skoufis falsely complained that was the motive of the entire Star CIO contract. Skoufis simply lied. Not only was their house not in foreclosure then, it was never in foreclosure, never behind in payments, and in fact, it was actually paid off years ago. I told you, my brother-in-law doesn't need to work unless he wants to. He's a very successful guy. So you had a New York State senator backed up by 2 New York State assemblymen, one of whom, Jonathan Jacobson, is probably best known for public urination than actual legislative accomplishment, backed up by 4 county legislators, literally go on TV, Facebook, and other media and claim my sister-in-law's home was under foreclosure when in fact it was paid off years ago. Who in their right mind would do something like that? Except someone filled with rage and recklessness and hate, who thinks they can say and do whatever they want with no consequence. It was a disgusting lie by Skoufis. But try being part of their home that night. Many of you have kids. Try being part of the home that night when they had to tell their 16-year-old daughter, who saw Blaise Gomez's lie on cable TV, "No, honey, we aren't losing our home." The media wants to run their mouth about challenges facing our young people. When you publish crap like that, Senator Skoufis, Hank Gross, Blaise Gomez, Genesis Ramos, Mike Anagnestakis, Mike Perdue, and Lori Tautel, when you publish crap and lies like that and not verify it, do you know what you could do to a 16-year-old girl who's got to walk through the halls of her school the next day? The kid gets looks in the hallway, the snickers, the mean-spirited talk behind her back, and it's all a lie. How dare you do that? Mike Perdue, Genesis Ramos, Lori Tautel, Mike Anagnestakis, you're county officials. You're standing on county property, spewing defamatory and false information about people you don't even know, People have children, and it was a lie. Shame on you. The media follow-up on that story should have been Senator falsely defames business owner. But the media, of course, doesn't do that because some in the media have their own special interests. One in particular. Beyond the lies told by Skoufis, misinformation and came from, unfortunately, your own colleagues, legislators Ramos, Paduk, Anagnostakis, and Tautel. The legislators who spoke, those legislators are really just an extension of James Skoufis, filled to the brim with their own conflicts. One used to work for him, one works for him now, and one is so invested in his re-election, she actually suggested violating the labor law to hurt his opponent. Legislator Lori Tautel, she used to work for him. She was paid thousands of dollars by him. Modem, she was on the Skoufis take, bought and paid for. Legislator Michael Anagnostakis, he still works for Skoufis. He's literally Skoufis' senior advisor. He is on the Skoufis take, bought and paid for. I want to talk about a couple of Anagnostakis' lies first, before I get to legislator Ramos' statement. Anagnostakis, a county official, claims my job was to hire the CIO. Fact. County job titles are created by the legislature, not me. I wish I could do that. Secondly, Anagnostakis voted against funding a CIO when Newhouse asked for the funding 2 years ago. Third, Anagnostakis voted against the local law creating the CIO position just 2 months ago, a local law that took effect just 3 weeks ago. Could have been 4 weeks at this point. And the Newhouse administration has already nominated a CIO for it. Sorry if I'm spilling the beans, but you'll be getting a legislative request soon. Anagnostakis claims he knew nothing about a contract for this work, yet he was present at the October 27, 2021 legislative meeting where the high cost of IT consultants was expressly discussed. And he voted against bringing that job in-house that same day. Line number 2 from Anagnostakis. He claimed the owner of Star CIO was, quote, in dire financial straits about ready to lose his home. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a county legislator engaging in defamation against a private citizen. It was entirely false, not a shred of truth. Mr. Anagnostakis claimed to be speaking only as a county legislator and not as a Skoufis staffer when he made those statements. I seriously hope the county legislature does not agree to defend or indemnify Anagnostakis for his defamatory statements. Line number 3 from Anagnostakis, he claimed I was appointed commissioner late last year. In fact, I was commissioner of HR from February of 2022. He claimed I wanted to be commissioner, which is the more important bunch of his lies, so I could have the deniability about this contract. That's another complete lie. Some of you in this room know me quite well, and I've had very candid conversations with you about why I wanted to become a commissioner. A job, we have to say, previously held by the editor of MidHudsonNews.com's son. That son has been a tremendous ally of mine in the transfer from his leadership of the HR department to mine. I have nothing negative to say about him. But the father has his own conflict of interest in continuing to put these stories out there without disclosing that conflict of interest and is breaking every conceivable journalistic ethical standard by failing to disclose that. But I took this job because, quite frankly, after 8 years of being county attorney, I wanted a change. I like being a lawyer, of course, but I really like 2 kinds of law. I love election law, and I love labor law. And as county attorney, I couldn't practice election law, so now I can if I want to, although I haven't so far. And I love labor law, and now I get to spend almost my entire time dealing with labor law issues. And yes, it's not a secret. I was 49 years old at the time of my appointment. I was very happy to get a 6-year term that would bring me to 55 in public service. There's no secret there. I've never hit it. A third legislator who spoke was legislator Genesis Ramos. Ms. Ramos, though, simply doesn't take the time to do her homework. Just last week, legislator Ramos complained that the county executive appointed an employee, Harry Poor, to be the interim CIO. Had Ms. Ramos even bothered to do her job or consult her own counsel, she would have probably realized that the county was required by state mandate, Section 70 of the Civil Service Law, to make that appointment in order to effectuate the transfer of employees from the Department of General Services to the newly created Department of Information Services. The bottom line is you have to have 2 department heads as part of that transfer process under civil service law, and there have to be employees. That was simply the purpose of that. It was simply to comply with a state mandate. But that would have required actual work on the part of legislator Ramos, when instead all so far she's had to do is speak in platitudes when she bothers to show up at all. Legislator Ramos asserted we were attempting to pay a new full-time CIO $125,000, and she couldn't understand how that's possible. She stated, and I quote, "The math isn't mathing." This is either malice on her part, recklessness on her part, or most likely just incompetence on her part. In fact, the county has been advertising a CIO at up to $225,000 a year, not $125,000 per year. It's been on the county website for weeks. On top of that, you get a car, you get a $40,000 health insurance package, and the luxury of public employment, and it's a wonderful attraction, you get retirement benefits that, depending on how long you've been in public service, can easily be 60% of that final average salary for the rest of your life. I made more money in private practice law than I ever made as county attorney, but there are retirement benefits that come with public sector and with public employment benefit. This is simply one of them. So an employee who comes to work for the county today stands to make a salary of up to $225,000, not the $125,000 Ramos claimed, a car benefit worth $10,000 a year, a health plan worth $40,000 a year, and a pension that could easily be $130,000 for the rest of their life. But I don't have to guess Ms. Ramos's motivation for her misinformation. She's already told Majority Leader Fagione her motivation for her actions. Legislator Ramos has her own conflict of interest. She's attempted to stymie the hiring of Dory Houle. And Majority Leader Fagione, you're here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but she has complained to Majority Leader Fagione about my hiring of Dory Houle. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So Legislator Ramos, in violation of labor law, sought to have me discriminate against Dory Houle by going to the Majority Leader to complain about her being hired. Who is Dory Houle? Dory Houle is the motive for the Skoufis lies. These allegations by Skoufis and his cronies are nothing more than a political hit job. Skoufis has made up his lies to target my family this year with the ultimate goal of standing Dory Houle in the election next year. Why? Because Dory works for me in the Department of Human Resources. That's right, James Skoufis' opponent works for me. I appointed her to her job. We know James Skoufis didn't do anything about Governor Hochul's $600 million no-bid contract for COVID tests, something his committee actually has jurisdiction over. James doesn't really care about taxpayer money. He let a $600 million no-bid contract go through Albany without a second look. We know James Skoufis didn't stop the deaths of seniors caused by Governor Cuomo's order to send COVID into nursing homes. He didn't even have the guts to take on Cuomo's pay raise, hiding in the bathroom instead, all while COVID was destroying lives in our nursing homes. Let me say it again. This is simply an effort by Skoufis to stain Dory Houle in next year's election. He's got over $1 million in his campaign war chest, filled to the brim with special interest money, and he will use that in an attempt to stain her next year. Mark my words right now. So let me conclude by saying this. I knew nothing about Star CIO's contract terms, hours, any extensions, or the amounts until the county attorney told me about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I do not have a copy of the contract. I have not read the contract. I did not negotiate its terms or amounts, nor have any involvement in the vetting of the contract. I've been in government for 31 years. This is my last job before I retire. If there's one thing anyone knows about me, they will tell you this. I have endurance. I can take a lot. But just because I hired James Skoufis' opponent, which he never disclosed during his press conference and statements, his own conflict of interest, does not give him the right to lie about a hardworking small business owner and his wife and their 3 children. No 16-year-old child should ever have to be asked if she's going to be homeless because James Skoufis wants to play politics. Orange County should not be used as a prop to be a foil against James Skoufis' political career. After raising and spending over $1 million in special interest money, seeking and getting the Curious Joel block votes from people he's demonized for years because he knew his polling was tight, James Skoufis chose to demonize my family simply because he desires to use it against his opponent in next year's election. This is the only thing this is about. A politician with a disastrous record who, without facts, makes McCarthy-esque defamatory statements and now has roped in county officials with his lies. The legislature should do the following at the conclusion of this. Should make an affirmative finding that Michael Anagnostakis' statement that the owner of Star CIO was in financial trouble facing foreclosure was a reckless, false, and defamatory statement, he should be censured for making that statement and exposing the county to such liability. The legislature should censor Michael Anagnostakis for claiming it was my responsibility as HR commissioner to fill the CIO job for the past 10 months when the job has not even been created by the resolution of the legislature yet, and which obviously cannot be filled until it's created. Well, I can probably take more attacks than the average department head. You cannot have county legislators lying about county employees in a way which effectively creates a hostile work environment, which is what Anagnostakis has done. The legislature should find that Skoufis's statements are false and defamatory and reprimand him for using county property as a prop to host his political stunt. The legislature should formally rebuke Legislator Ramos for using her official position to attempt to stymie the hiring of somebody simply for exercising the right to seek public office. The legislature should find that Skoufis and the 4 legislators who spoke at his press conference presented no evidence that I've done anything improper and should censor those legislators from making baseless assertions. You cannot allow members of your body to stand on county property with no actual evidence other than theories and demonstrably proven falsehood and slander county employees, even me. Being elected comes with a responsibility to vet your allegations before you make them, certainly about your employees. The legislature should make a formal finding that Skoufis and county legislators published a false and defamatory statement against Isaac Sokolic and me, and that the publication of the same was reckless and malicious. My family was maligned for political reasons by a slick Albany politician, and either unwitting or unequally unethical colleagues of yours. The legislature should do anything it can to have those lies formally recognized as lies and as nothing more than the political smear they are. I'll be happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. As you know, that this committee is tasked to write a report for the Rules Committee of the Legislature, and I guess the Rules Committee is welcome to do what they see fit after we file the report with them. Since you mentioned my name, I'll let Mr. Finkelstein know if your compliments to the firm.
It's an excellent term.
And
I always hated when they sued us.
And I'll also let you know that my county ethics form lists my employment there. I'm not a lawyer. I don't handle cases against Orange County. And not only when Mr. Golden was chairman of the ethics board, but now I have your legal opinion as well that there's no conflict. I appreciate all those issues.
If I thought I could have DQ'd the Finkelstein firm when I was county attorney, best your bottom dollar, I would have.
Well, it was tried once under a different administration. Legislator Lujan, I know you might have to leave, so I'm going to start with you. I'll wait. Okay.
I have no questions.
No question.
Okay, so I'm just gonna talk about some of the things that were said, and not a lot, because you covered pretty much everything. So I presume that Alicia came to you, you suggested an individual that Ms. Waikata now confirms is highly qualified, and you walked away from the process. Is that it?
That's correct.
The Cliff Note version?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I know for a fact that the legislature didn't create the position of CIO until the meeting, I guess, a month or two ago, which I was at, and the county attorney's office covered all the issues with respect to, being in jeopardy of being hacked and things of that nature, which is why we went about that. I'm also very in tune with the CAD system and the niche system as my role on the County Police Advisory Board and as chairman of public safety. It really wasn't going well, and I haven't heard any complaints recently, so I assume it's going better now. In your capacity as a lawyer, is someone allowed to use county property and plug into our electricity if that's what happened for a press conference, or?
In my capacity as a lawyer, I don't know the answer to that, but I will tell you this, I would never, if I were the county, if I had the discretion to stop someone from using our county for a slanderous press conference, I might certainly have looked at that. You've got a lot of free speech issues on public property, so you got to be very careful before you start roping people off from having demonstrations and that type of thing. So I think you're walking a fine line before you do that. I think the risk, though, is when you're a county official using county property to defame someone, that creates some potential liability for the county. If I were representing the people who defamed a small business owner with demonstrably false statements, I'd be very concerned right now.
Okay.
Especially someone with the resources to sue them.
So can we give Langdon one of these books, please? So the only reason I'm bringing this out is if you look at tab 2 on their contracts, the very first page, if you look at the bottom, you see that the contract, the page, I believe was signed by Ms. Swikata. I assume that's Mr. Golden's signature from the law department, but it doesn't really matter for today's purposes. A lawyer from the county law department signed it. We have Deb Kozinski, our budget director, Dan Castricone, our risk manager, and then the human resource approval is blank. Is that intentional because of
No.
your recusal of this matter?
Absolutely not. HR does not approve county contracts unless it involves former county employees. So I heard, good point. I think, I don't know which one of the folks downstairs ran their mouth about that. We don't have anything to do with county contracts unless it's an HR department contract, like the salary study, for example. Or if you're dealing with a former county employee, and we may not even sign these forms. I'll often get a call, hey, does the county have a problem if we contract with former employee X? And the reason for that is A, you might want to know, is there a disciplinary history there with the employees, or something we're not aware of there? B, you always got what's called the 211 issue. If you're going to go up $35,000 a year, you got to make sure that department doesn't do that, although most departments know that. But HR does not routinely sign these contracts at all,
Unless it has something to do with HR.
unless it has something to do with HR. That's
All right, so HR really has no role in county contracts unless the individual is going to serve the HR department, is that a fair statement?
Or was a former county employee. We bring back a lot of former county employees as consultants as part of a transitional service. You know, Deputy Commissioner Smith leaves and we're bringing in another deputy commissioner. We might bring back Deputy Commissioner Smith as a consultant, an independent contractor, and pay him or her an hourly rate to provide transitional. It's a very common experience. And that's when HR gets consulted because we want to know, hey, is there a problem with this employee that we don't know about? Is there any reason we shouldn't bring this person back? And then, of course, you always have, as I say, the 211 wage issue.
And I just want to clarify one more thing, because I don't remember what you said. With respect to Alicia, you approached her, she approached you,
She approached me.
and she said something to the effect that, do you know anybody, or how did that go?
She said, I need to get a contact of somebody. She was very concerned that the existing contractor was not performing. And it literally happens that I know a fair number of people over 31 years, but I don't know a lot about IT. Literally have somebody, this book was published, 2017, 18, whatever, long before this. This is what the cover sleeve says. So when you talk about a digital transformation changing from, how you're going to divide a new department and create all the different tasks, written by an experienced CIO with multiple transformation efforts under his belt, and I'm not doing a commercial, but this is exactly how on point the individual's experience happened to be. Packed with insights, guidelines, and stories from the front lines, the book explains to turn a traditional IT department into an agile operation skilled at using and integrating new digital platforms, shift people away from legacy practices that add unnecessary cost and complexity, develop digital products starting with capturing ideas from employees, understanding customer needs, and developing go-to-market plans, enable citizen data scientists to promote a data-driven organization, establish strategic platforms and enable emerging technologies such as blockchain, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence. And there's a couple more things. So literally exactly on point. And when I said to Alicia, take a look at these two books on this guy's website, see if that's what you want, because I'm not a tech person. She was angry at me for why in the world didn't you tell me about this guy before? And the defamatory lies by Skoufis and Anagnostakis. My brother-in-law needed this job like he needs a hole in his head. He doesn't need to work if he doesn't want to work, and that's a wonderful luxury. My in-laws had two daughters, one married a public servant and one married a smart IT guy. I don't know, but all I can tell you is this is exactly what you're suited for. But I want Alicia to go vet this on her own without knowing any relationship, and only then say, if you want me to put you in touch, I will. I really didn't know if Isaac would even take the contract because he deals with so much bigger issues than this, honestly.
And did you share your relationship with the other county employees, the executive, deputy county executive?
I share it with the deputy county, share it with the county executive, and I share it with the county executive, not the deputy county executive. He and I tend to run on different tracks organizational. So I work directly for the county executive, and I shared it with Alicia, and the county attorney was made aware of it, and Sam Swikata was made aware of it. And I was told I do not want anything to do with this contract. I told Isaac not to discuss the contract with me, and I told Alicia not to discuss the contract with me, and I told them both that in writing, and they did not.
And that was all before the summer.
That was well before, that was in November. I didn't want to be part of the discussions. Let me tell you, and I've said this before, I'm now 51 years old. This is the last job in my career. What you have to understand, I know Isaac doesn't need the job, notwithstanding Scoofus's lies. I'm going to end this job. This is the best job in my career. I want to end it in a high way. I never want to have any accusation or impropriety. And in my wildest dreams, I couldn't imagine that Joe McCarthy Jr. would ever stain my family the way we've been stained. We literally are not going to have Thanksgiving together this fall. We wouldn't even contemplate it because of all these allegations. Who's talking to what? It's a disgrace, the stresses put on my family. You literally can't imagine how it's hurt my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law. You just can't imagine. It's a horrible allegation, and they're lies.
What do you say, Lou?
Thank you. First off, Commissioner, thank you for taking the time. And so I had a few questions, they're gonna bounce around a little bit. The first one revolves around kind of the centerpiece of the allegation is that there was a need there, and you're stating that there was never a foreclosure, there's never anything like that, that's completely lies, is that correct?
Never a foreclosure, never a lawsuit, never a late, probably never a late payment. These are fairly successful people, and their house has been paid off years ago.
So we would not see any legal documents that would suggest a lawsuit of anything like that, a mortgagee company, anytime, at any point. We would never see anything like that. To the best of your
I'm
knowledge.
not sure that's an appropriate question for Mr. Chapman, is it? The finances of his brother-in-law?
That's fine.
To,
You're a lawyer, you can answer if you want.
to whatever extent.
I don't know what you'd see, but I can tell you this, factually speaking, how are you here? Okay. I think I've got the law right on this, but you correct me if I'm wrong. When you bring a foreclosure action against somebody, you're required to, I think it's in 14-point font, labeled across the top of the summons and complaint. I think it's supposed to actually say something like, notice, you are in danger of losing your home. And it's a very clear statement that anybody who's done a speck of investigation would understand what a foreclosure action is. So the bottom line is, this was not the case. This was false, defamatory. This house was paid off years ago.
Thank you. The other question was in regards to, I had asked previously, to your knowledge, the county executive and the deputy county executive, are they normally the ones who sign off on contracts?
Contracts can get signed off on by Steve, Harry, or Alicia, and it really is a function of who's in the office. Harry's usually one in the office to sign it, but like anybody, he'll take a vacation. He'll be out, he'll be in an event, he'll be sick, he'll whatever. And he doesn't. There's a process where somebody else can sign in Harry's absence, and that's Alicia.
So the process would be, so if the deputy county executive, the county executive are not in the building, or is it that they might be in the restroom and then she would sign, like, do you?
I don't know the intricacies of those details.
Harry's gonna be here.
But Harry, to my knowledge, if you look at county contracts, you see that he signs the vast majority of the contracts. And when Wayne Booth was a deputy county executive, it was like one of the first things we covered when I was county attorney, hey, can the deputy sign? And my view was the county executive could authorize the deputy to sign. And I believe the current county attorney has continued that practice.
If I may, the charter, the charter sets forth that the county executive may sign and his designate. He has designated the deputy county executive as well as Alicia.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Look at them.
A couple quick. Commissioner, thanks for being here today and sharing your thoughts. One thing that hasn't been brought up here, Mr. Chairman, and I find it interesting from the county attorney, that our four colleagues had made a request on Monday, the 16th of October, for a bunch of information. Were you contacted at all for any of that information?
I was not contacted at all by any of them. And by the way, they all can contact me. Legislator Ramos has emailed me on another matter. I've responded back to her, forthwith. I respond back to all of you, pretty fast. At the end of the day, whether I deal with you as my direct chairman or you as a member of my committee, or I don't think you're not in PNC, Kevin, are you anymore? Or the majority leader, at the end of the day, while I work for the county executive, you're all my bosses. I need you to keep you happy. I respond to legislators pretty darn fast. And I think you all know that, regardless of who you are. So,
So there were no requests.
they never bothered to contact me.
Now, secondly, put your county attorney hat back on. Should something have been foiled, how long would an average foil take? I mean, depending on the circumstances. Would it be less than 24 hours?
Oh, gosh, no. So FOIL provides a process where once a FOIL is made, you have a 5 business day process where you acknowledge the FOIL. You know, dear legislator Sassy, I've received your FOIL request and will be responded to within 20 business days. So you got 5 days to send the original notice and then 20 business days to actually respond. As a matter of practice, not in this county so much, we're pretty good with FOILs. You've got a lot of local governments that and state governments that can take months and months and months and years sometimes to respond to FOIL, depending on the voluminous, how voluminous or how well described the record is. But we get FOILs in HR pretty routinely. We respond to them, 15, 20 days is a pretty standard process, faster if we can.
So would you find it odd then that on the 16th, the accusations were made and a request, but within 24 hours, there was a press conference claiming that the county had dropped the ball and not responded?
It was odd that there was a press release that the intent was to actually generate the information, but this was not the intent. This was a political stunt, whole lock, stock, and barrel, designed to taint me and my family this year, simply because Dory Hoole, who, by the way, it's not just anybody's political opponent. You all know I've worked in the Senate. Dory spent 50 grand or so on a race last year to run against Skoufis. Skoufis spent about $1.3 million. He beat her by 1.5 points, and he needed the KJ block vote, and I cast no aspersions on that to win. So this is a woman he's very scared of running against him again. So he's trying to use this as all his strategy use it next year. Mark my words, you will see this in his campaign next year against Dory Hoole. Mark my words right now. The best way to stop that is to make findings that what he did was a lie and censor him for it.
So in summation, a county employee under your department leadership is a announced candidate for New York State Senate against the senator.
She was the last candidate and she is the next candidate. She is announced and he's been upset vocalizing that I hired her.
Thank you.
Mr. Chapman, you mentioned that you sent either a letter or an email to people saying you didn't want to be involved in this?
I did, a text.
Can you, it's a text? Is there a way to get us a copy of that, just so we can have it for the record that on such a date,
I can,
you sort of recused yourself from the process?
no sort of.
It's not that I don't believe you, it just helps to document everything for our report,
Sure.
attach it if necessary.
Thank you for reminding that. Was my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Anybody else have anything for the commissioner?
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to thank Commissioner Chapman for being here today. And I appreciate your statement. And I just want to let you know that here at this table, we accept the information that people give us as the truth. And it's clear without a doubt that you've brought the truth here today. And that I am just so sorry that your family was put through this. It's embarrassing that people would make accusations like that based upon false assumptions and claiming things like that. So there's someone who represents my citizens in Western Orange County, but also represent all of Orange County. It's a sad day when someone has to come up here and talk about his family in this way, about this defamed accusations that were made against your family. So I'm sorry for you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or statements? So just some housekeeping issues. We meet that rest of the contracts. I don't know if Ms. Pierce, you can get that. Commissioner Swikata mentioned, I think it was a continuing extension or something that we don't have. And if there's any other documents, I know these were the documents that were given to the Democratic caucus, but I don't think it's a complete set of what we actually need. So if there's any other documents that, I don't want to have to do a FOIL because, I mean, you turn these over in one day on a
No,
request.
That's fine. I know that there was a request for other documents, but I think it was amended, so if we could just find out what exactly, I know you asked for specific things that I will provide to you,
Yes.
but there were other documents I think they were requesting from Ms. Wyckoff.
Yeah.
And we can.
Yeah, we were just looking for process things as to like, do you send an email? How does things get finalized? Things of that nature. Just documentation, because I'm sure there's some sort of documents that get exchanged or emails within the department. Just about the processes and who's going to sign off next, who's going to do what. It just gives us a timeline for the dates of when certain things occurred. And like I said, it seems to me from our discussion with the Commissioner Swikata that we're missing a key piece that triggered her to write that June letter just to document the file, I guess, since it wasn't addressed to anybody. Then I think she said that the county exec signed off on something before that letter was written, and we don't have that.
We can get it.
And then again, one of the first requests was any documentation on the other, other individuals or other groups and organizations that we might have tried to contract with. Any emails, anything that shows that we had actually reached out to those business entities in any way, any capacity since last year. Thank you.
Anybody else have any issues? Okay, for the general public, we will meet again Monday, June 20th at November 20th. Wow, I'm wishing it's summer again. November 20th at 9 a.m. And then we will meet again November 21st at 1 p.m.
The notices will be issued.
And we will notice it and let everybody know. If there's no other issues, we're looking to adjourn as an order.
So moved.